So you can see there's a welcome. Oh, recording has started. Thanks, Blue Jeans, for telling me that. So welcome, Region 2. I see a few of you out there. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen briefly so that you can see me. Hopefully everyone can see me. I want to introduce our esteemed presenters today. We have with us Faye Howard, who is the Assistant Vice President, and you can correct me if I'm getting any titles wrong, the Assistant Vice President of Academic Success and Student Retention at Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania. And she will, I'm sure, illuminate with you with more information about her research as we go through this session. And also, Janina, or as many of us know, Nina Buchanan, Assistant Professor and Chair of the Wilmington University Doctoral Program in Higher Education Leadership and Innovation. Both are long time NACADA volunteers who have held multiple different positions within the organization. One is a current Region 2 conference chair, Faye, and then another, Nina, is one of our upcoming Region 2 conference chairs. So lots of leadership and insight here. So just so everyone out there knows, we are recording the first part of the session, and I'll stop the recording once we go into the Q&A session, so that no one needs to be on the internet who doesn't want to be. And just I'm Liz, I'm the communications chair for Region 2. So let me just share really quickly the agenda with you so everyone can see really quickly, and then we will hop into our session. So here is today's agenda, more for the video than for anything else. And I will mute myself and let Nina and Faye go ahead and take it away. So thanks again.
Well, thank you, Liz. And welcome, everybody. I'm happy to be here today with Nina, and we're going to talk to you a little bit today about research and hopefully answer some of your questions, provide a bit more information which you knew prior to joining. So I just want to start out by giving you just a little bit of information about myself. Liz was absolutely correct. She got the title right, university right, but I want to talk to you a little bit about my love story with research and where it all started. So as a undergraduate student, I went to school as what we now call exploratory students. Some schools are still saying undeclared or don't have a major. And I went through a great program actually at Montclair State University in New Jersey, which is also in Region 2. And it really helped me to figure out what major I wanted, and turned out sociology was perfect for me. I absolutely loved it. But what sociology gave me was my first date with research, where I knew when I saw things that were occurring in my family, I saw things that were occurring within my particular demographic, which would be, broken down into my income and my race and my gender. I started to notice things that were similar amongst certain groups of people. And I paid the closest attention to what was going on in the category that impacted me the most. And what sociology really began to teach me was that, through research, we are able to discover and find out what's occurring, not only individually, but among different groups of people. And research was really where it all started for me. So just wanted to let you know it started way back when I was a freshman, Montclair State University, and my love affair continues today. So just talk to you a little bit about research, just in general. For the purposes of this seminar, I'm going to focus on social science research, because within NACADA, for the areas of research that we mostly focus on, it is social science research. But just to give you a nice little definition, so scientific research is the systematic investigation of any theory or hypothesis. And what I like to speak with students and people who have an interest in research, it really all starts with a question that people are seeking to answer. So, the term research is used quite often. You may hear your students talk about, I was researching the internet to find the best place to eat. I checked out Yelp. I know I use the term research when I'm going to buy a new electronic device. I'm one of those folks who I want to see the Consumer Reports review, how long it's going to last, what's the best buy, all of that. So we often use the term research, and many of us are researchers every day. But what we're going to talk to you a bit more is about scientific research. And so, as I mentioned before, I'm going to focus on social science research. And social science research really is about finding out answers to questions that involve people or groups of people, things like societies, even our economics, looking at globally, looking at the American society compared to another society. For many of us, looking at freshmen compared to sophomore, looking at the different subpopulations within each one of those categories. That really drills down to social science research. And just to give you a little bit of information, and keep in mind, this is just a general overview just to get you started on this path. So when we're talking about social science research, you really want to follow these 5 stages. And these are the accepted 5 stages when it comes to social science research. Keeping in mind they can be expanded or even minimized depending on what theoretical framework you decide to choose. But generally, you want to identify a problem or research question. And that's why I said, even if you identify a problem, you still really are asking a question. And I always like to go back to that. We're trying to find answers to questions. The second piece of it is that you want to develop a hypothesis, and we've done this every day. If I wake up on time, shower, get out the door, I'm going to be to work at a specific time. So it's really what it is. You develop a hypothesis. You may even try to change some things. What if I take a different route today? Will I arrive to work at the same time? So you really are working on the hypothesis piece. That third part is you want to gather the data. So we go with my example of, our commute to work every day. I want to try a different route, and I want to see if I get to work at the same time, perhaps earlier or perhaps later. So I'm going to go about that by gathering the data and going through that process. And really, to be really accurate, I probably don't just want to do it one time. Maybe I want to do it for a week and see what happens. Maybe I want to try it in different types of weather, perhaps if it's raining, if it's snowing. It's all about that data gathering process. The fourth step is you want to analyze the data. So you've gone out and collected it. Now you want to take a step back and find out, okay, what did I discover? And this is very important, and we really have to work against our own biases and our own subjectivity that we bring to the table. But you really just want to write down and have a clear log of exactly what happened, being as objective as possible. And then that final and fifth step is really where you draw your conclusions. So we know what happened, but what does it mean? And that's really where scientific research will lead us to moving in the future and making decisions about what we want to do as we move forward. So that's just a brief overview of those 5 steps, and just keeping in mind that for social science research, we really want to identify a problem or find an answer to a question. We want to develop a hypothesis, gather the data, then analyze the data, and then draw our conclusions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nina.
Thank you very much, Faye. Okay, my name is Nina Buchanan, and I am an assistant professor and chair of the Higher Education Leadership and Innovation Program at Wilmington University. I think, as many of us did, started my career path in a different way. I didn't know that I would end up exactly where I am today, but I started in residence life and in graduate school, started advising students who had participated in a summer bridge program. And so that, for me, bridged the gap between residential life and academic life. And I stayed working with that population for a long time before finishing my graduate program and moving on to full-time academic advising work. And always was interested in knowing more. I wouldn't say research when I first started thinking about this, but I always asked those questions. So I worked with students who were incoming freshmen in a summer bridge program. And I always thought, well, what will happen to them? How do we know that this bridge program is working well? What does working well mean? That they enroll in college? That they persist through the first year? That they graduate? That they graduate in 4 years? That they graduate in 6 years? And how will we measure what that success is? Are they successful if they graduate with a 2.0 or a 3.0 or a 3.5 or, with honors? What is success? And so I always had those questions driving me. And I knew very soon after I finished my master's degree that I wanted to go on for doctoral work. And the big push for me there was actually the ability to engage and to do that research. My initial interests were in focusing on student retention, but I'm ending up now focusing on retention of academic advisors and persistence in the career. regardless of what that career path is, staying involved and engaged. And so my current research work is looking at the impact of supervision and academic advising. And so I think that, one bit of advice that I have for you when you're thinking about research is ask a question that you're interested in. Don't sort of do research for the sake of, I want to be a researcher, or I want to do research. Like, what do you want to know? Because research is a little bit long. It's a little bit challenging, and you have to really want to know what the answer is, and then you have to want to share that with other folks. So that's the other part of it. So as Faye mentioned, walking through those stages of research, the second part of it is sharing that research, and we'll talk with you about that process today. And actually, right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump on over to the NACADA research page. So hopefully y'all can see my shared screen here. So I'm on the NACADA page, and if you use these menus here, you're going to scroll on over to resources where you will find the research related page, and you'll be able to look at the charge that NACADA gives us. So they do set forth an agenda for us. They give us a little bit of information about what our inquiry is, really what our research agenda as an organization is. So what is the impact? What's the context? What's the theoretical basis for what we are doing in academic advising? There's a committee. NACADA has a research committee, and so that might be a first stage for people who are interested in learning more about that. They give you some nice examples about what areas exist in research. And one thing that's really important for us to understand is that NACADA itself and academic advising as a profession is really still emerging. And it's critically important that in order to establish ourselves as a profession, as an organization, that we drive this research agenda. We have to participate in it. We have to understand and express the importance of the work that we're doing, both with students as professionals, and be able to articulate that research and contribute to not only our own body of research and advising, but largely in whether it's higher education as a whole or within student affairs, we need to participate and be present in that arena. And so it's incredibly important for us as an organization and for us as professionals to engage in that research. And so, Faye and I certainly encourage you to do that and to ask questions. Sometimes it can take a little time. Maybe you're interested in it, but you don't know how to get there. And so we'll talk more about that. But you could certainly start here on NACADA's research agenda page, where they'll talk with you about the impact, context, and theoretical basis of academic advising research. They'll also note here that there is an academic advising research grant that's funded by NACADA, and we will come back to that shortly. But Faye and I do want to talk with you about the importance of collaboration, because it is critically important. When you are a doctoral student or you're working on a master's thesis, you have inherently some support system built in. You have some ability to collaborate, to have people who are also engaging in that research. But if you are a professional and you're sort of the only person in your unit or on your campus who might be interested in a topic, how do you get that going? And how do you continue to stay motivated in reaching your goal? And you might need resources and things like that. So Faye and I do want to talk with you about the importance of collaboration. So I feel like I've been talking a little bit here. I don't know if Faye would like to jump back in and talk just a little bit about your own experiences, Faye, with collaborating, whether it's on campus, across campus, or with other colleagues you've met.
Thank you, Nina. And that's really a good segue, because one of the things that make this journey, and Nina is absolutely right, is that when you do get into the scientific research, and for our purposes, because we all are members of NACADA, it's social science research, that the journey is not a short one. Nina and I were chatting before we became live, and I'm currently in my data collection stage of my doctoral research, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later. But it is a journey, and it takes several years on average to really move forward, because many of us are working full time and have different responsibilities. And that's why collaboration really plays an important role, not only from our charge that we have from NACADA, but really with our colleagues and just for our own well-being. So when you decide to collaborate with someone or another institution or organization, there's a couple of things that take place, and it really does help enhance the overall process. Um, and just want to talk to you about the fact that when you collaborate, there's a shared responsibility, so you don't feel like you're in this alone. And it really does help with the burden of all the different processes and steps in research that I discussed a little bit earlier. You have a built-in support system, and then you also have some accountability that can help you move things along perhaps a little bit faster if you were on this journey by yourself. But one of the things that NACADA also does make sure they want us all to participate in is collaboration, because as Nina mentioned, our practice is still emerging. So the fact that it's still emerging, we need as much research as possible, and we become much more validated in what we do and the research that we put out when we have people not only nationally but globally doing the same type of research and coming out with the same results. That's one of the key components of research, is that when you hit that final stage and you're really talking about, okay, so what do I do with this, and what does this mean, and what does this mean for the particular population or groups or people that I was talking about in my research. Okay, so maybe your research said this, but is this going to be the same applied to perhaps a non-US organization or school or another subpopulation? So it's really important on just a scientific research basis to really get that validity that we are charged with through NACADA to make sure that we're doing that. And then, of course, on that personal note, like I said, it's always nice to share the burden. I even talked to Nina a little bit before we started and just got some information. Okay, how long did it take you to, wrap up your last final chapters? Just getting that information and confirmation from people who've been where you've been, they've gone through that journey. It always helps with the process. So we strongly recommend collaboration for personal reasons, just to keep you sane and to help your well-being, but also because it is a charge from NACADA as well. And we want to make sure that what we're doing is validated, and it's not just working well for us, because we want to make sure we share our knowledge to not only support the students that we come in contact with at our own departments and at our own institutions, but nationwide and globally as well. So collaboration is key. And when we talk a little bit more about grants, that will also come back up again when we get to that detail. Today, it's very rare that grants will be okay with the fact that you're not collaborating either with someone else at your school or perhaps another nonprofit. They really want to make sure that there's some collaboration in many ways, that you're not just working solo. And I think that that's a bit of a change from past years. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to grants as well. So with that, I will turn it back over to Nina, and we are going to talk a little bit about the Research NACADA grant. I have received a Research NACADA grant, and Nina has as well. So we're able to speak to you in first person about that process.
Absolutely. And as Faye has mentioned, the collaboration happens in many ways. And so for Faye and I, we each have a research grant. And so I had applied, about a year before Faye did, and had just gone through the process. And it was helpful, I think, for Faye to say, like, how long did this take you? And did you include this information in your application? And so in that way, Faye and I are not doing the same research, but it was incredibly helpful for each of us, I think, to know that the other was in that same process. And we've been able to chat about that, whether it's been, process oriented questions or things like, what device did you use to record your interviews? So it's just nice to have that partnership. And so we certainly encourage people to do that. And early on in my career, I'm aware that there was a group that I wasn't ready to join yet, but it was a group of women who were all interested in different research aspects. So they didn't have a common goal, but they all wanted to publish. They all wanted to do that research. So they met, every couple of months. They got together and said, where are you now? What are you doing? How are you going to make this happen? And kept each other on track. So even if you don't have a direct research collaboration, we definitely encourage you to link up, form a community, a group, a partnership. It really does help to keep that going, keep that motivation up. Now, the other thing, as Faye was mentioning, sort of having you're doing a particular study, and it might be helpful for someone at a different type of institution to do the same type of study. And you are able to maybe compare results, draw conclusions. So if you're at a community college and someone else is at a private 4-year, but you sort of do the same study, you can compare and contrast what comes of that study, and then you may be able to collaborate on publications, presentations, or something like that. If you have a similar research interest as someone else, but you don't happen to work with the same population, that's still a good way to collaborate, and it's a wonderful thing that NACADA would certainly encourage. And so I don't want to overhype the collaboration piece, but it's incredibly helpful on a personal level, but it really also does, as Faye mentioned, contribute to a body of research when there's more than one person doing it. So, from personal and professional perspectives, we definitely encourage you to do that. Now I'm going to go ahead and hop on over again to the website. We're going to take a look more specifically at the NACADA Research Grant. It's on the same page. So you're going to pop over here to resources, down to research related, and then over here on the left menu, you will see the research agenda that we looked at before, as well as the research grant page. So what this page gives you is some basic information about the way that the grant works. It provides a lot of information about the application process. It operates in 2 rounds on an annual basis, and it gives you the opening and closing dates. And we're currently sort of finishing up the rounds for this 2017 year, and applications for 2018 will be coming up in October and then November. It's an online process. If you follow the instructions, there's an extent to which I can say this is a simple and straightforward process, but it is time consuming, and it requires a great deal of effort on your part. And as well, it requires you to have support from your institution, to have very clear guidelines. You don't need IRB or human subjects approval before you apply, but you will need to do that prior to accepting the grant. And so there's a lot of legwork that you need to be able to do, and a lot of information that you need to be able to articulate. So you do need more than an idea. And you'll also need institutional support. It will be really important, in fact, required for you to have that institutional support, whether it's just, yes, we support her travel, or we are actually providing supplementary funds, or whatever it is. You'll need to have a conversation with, at the very least, your supervisor, but sometimes multiple tiers there, so that you make sure that you have the institutional support. And Faye and I will talk a lot more about that, because what does institutional support mean? Is it where you're doing your master's degree or your doctoral degree? Is it the institution at which you work? It gets a little tricky, a little muddy. And so we will talk about that a little more in depth. But just for the purposes of sort of knowing what you might need to provide in order to apply, you'll see that there is an online grant application. But what I really recommend is that you initially download the PDF and take a look at what's required. Organizationally, it's very clear what you need to do and what you need to provide. You need to provide resumes for yourself if you're by yourself, and any co-investigators if you have a partner, or if you have sponsored research like Faye does from her institution for her doctoral program. And then they'll give you a really clear overview for your proposal, including the lit review, your research question, what procedures you're going to do, what that's based on, any references, and a timeline, as well as a budget form. And that is going to be critical for you. You will need to justify, the grant is money. It's not just sponsorship. So what will you use that money for? And they're very clear about what you can and cannot use that money for. And you'll also need to provide human subject clearance. And so we can talk a little bit more about all of those things. Certainly in the Q&A, Faye and I will address some of those items as we talk here. But certainly that's something we would be happy to talk about in the Q&A portion. But the detail that's provided on the NACADA page is very, very clear. Faye and I both had very good experiences with the submission and finding out that, yes, we absolutely provided everything that was required. And that was, I think, to the benefit of the NACADA Executive Office. Are very clear about what they're looking for. And as long as you provide that information, it was a very smooth process for each of us in terms of the application process. NACADA membership is not required, which is very helpful for you to know because you may be participating by yourself, but you may be participating with someone who's in student life or admissions or someone else like that who might belong to a different type of organization and not be affiliated with NACADA. That's okay. The grants are from small projects from $500 up to $5,000. And again, here there's some information about what you can and cannot use those funds for. And they give you some helpful information about anticipating the costs. And they do encourage you to discuss this with your institution or your agency if you work for a nonprofit or anything like that before you submit, because there are some little tricks about when the grant is actually issued to you, how that process takes place. And it'll be really important for you to understand on your institution or organization's end what will happen when NACADA needs to distribute those funds, because they will not provide them to you directly. They'll provide them to your institution, and it will be you and the institution that will account for those funds and provide details about the budget, both upfront and then as you continue through the grant over the course of the year or longer. They are pretty flexible. I've needed to extend my grant due to some unforeseen circumstances in terms of changing my position. And so they've been very helpful and very supportive. So, you can make adjustments as you go. If you're not exactly sure how long this is going to take you, they'll work with you on that. But they also have very clear information about how long it's going to take once you submit and who you'll be communicating with. I found that process to be very good, very clear, and it indicates that you'll get your response within 90 days, and I certainly did. It was very quick for me. I want to say it was within a month that I got my approval. And so the details are here. There's a great deal of information, but again, we've emphasized that this is a collaborative process. And so there are some other folks in Region 2 who have received NACADA research grants previously, but Faye and I would be happy to talk to you about that process if you just have some basic questions, whether that's today or in the future. So I feel like I talked a little bit long time about that. So I'll have Faye jump in and talk a little bit about the preparation and communication for the grant process.
Thanks, Nina. And what I think I'd like to talk to you a little bit about specifically is the prep. I can honestly say I did a great job in making sure I submitted a complete proposal that answered all the questions that NACADA needed to have answered in the order. But the area where, if I had to do this over again, that I advise anyone who's interested in this is doing your prep to find out what is required on your institutional side before you accept a grant. And that was what I didn't really do my due diligence regarding. And as Nina mentioned, I received my grant to support my dissertation research. And before you get your official letters and become a doctorate, you are working as a researcher under a dissertation chair or dissertation director. The title is different depending on the school you're attending. So what I discovered was, in order for NACADA to provide me with the funding, there was some preparatory information that I had to submit to our IRB office and our scholarship office that I did not do prior to submitting my grant. So that took about a good 3 weeks working through that information with my degree granting institution until they finally just said, you know what, you work for another institution, you might be better off working with them. My doctoral degree granting institution is a Research One institution, and it has quite a bit of bureaucracy, and rightly so, due to the large volume of research that's being conducted there. My current institution is not. It's not a Research One institution. I can pick up the phone and call the person that's in charge of grants. There isn't a process for me to go to, so that was the route that we ended up going with. And I would not have had that good 3 weeks of back and forth with my degree granting institution if I would have done my due diligence beforehand. So I can't emphasize enough to make sure you find out you've completed everything you needed to do with your institution to actually receive your grant. I can't imagine how disappointing it would have been for me to have gone through this. As Nina mentioned, it is quite time consuming to make sure you prepare a full and complete proposal, get the grant, and then find out that you weren't going to be able to receive it. So it worked out well for me, but I don't want anybody else to, suffer some consequences because they didn't go through the required prep beforehand. So I can't stress that enough. Nina, did you want to add anything about prep before?
I mean, I think just doing some initial information gathering is helpful. So if you haven't gone through an IRB process before, looking at those materials, trying to get an idea of how long it will take you and what you'll need to do. Most of the time, you need to do a training program. And for some institutions, that's an online certification program in human subjects, and other times it's a class that you'll need to sign up for through your grant or scholarship office on campus. And so you'll need to find out about what that process will be like. When you find out that you are awarded the grant, you need to turn that around really quickly, and you need to get support from your institution. So you'll need to know, okay, if I get this, my next steps are, and this is how long it will take me. And then I think having some very pointed conversation with not only your own supervisor, but potentially maybe your supervisor's supervisor. Not necessarily because it's a conversation about they're supporting you in that research. I'm hopeful that many of us have that kind of support and that that's encouraged. But really, there's a lot of institutional policy that you may not be familiar with surrounding research, surrounding conflict of interest and things like that, that you just need to be informed of. At the time that I applied for my grant, I was working in an academic unit, and my dean was able to speak very clearly to me about what's on the institutional side of our commitments. My institution required matching funds, and that needed to come directly from my unit. And in this time of budget cuts, it was really tough, and we had to talk about how we were going to do that and what matching funds from my institution's perspective looked like. We got I don't want to say lucky, but we were able to make it work well in that you're not able to use the NACADA funds for travel related to conferences. But my institution said, well, okay, then when we support you to go to this conference to conduct your interviews, we're supporting that travel, we're supporting that conference registration fee, and we'll consider that part of our matching funds. And that was okay through our institution. But if I hadn't had that conversation in the beginning, it could have been really troublesome when I said, hey, we need 100% matching funds from the institution. Hope you can give me these few $1,000s. And so I think, you don't know what you don't know. And so being able to talk to, your supervisor about it and know that you need to ask questions about your institution's requirements for research is going to be really important. And I think what you don't want to do, as Faye mentioned, is go through this whole process, get the award, and then find out that logistically on your institution's end, it's either very challenging or not possible. So I would say as part of that proposal process that you have really a thorough conversation with your supervisor. And if you know anyone on campus, or you can meet with someone on campus in your grant office, research office, it might be institutional research or something of that sort, depending on the size of your campus, who can talk with you about what it means to be a primary investigator on your campus, that would be really helpful. So Faye and I are going to talk with you now, frankly, about some of the challenges we've faced, and we've mentioned some of those already. But both of us had institutional changes that impacted us. So I'll let Faye speak first about, what she had mentioned previously with whether she was, going through the process for her home institution where she worked versus the institution where she was earning her doctorate.
So just in brief, one of the things that I highly recommend that you find out if you are working under a principal investigator in your country, it is really important that you're familiar with the research process. So this isn't the first time I've had to go through the IRB process or even work with the grants office, but this is the first time I've had to do it in this capacity. So what I found out was in this capacity at my degree granting institution, that since I'm not the PI, I'm not eligible to accept the full award of the grant. That's something that I think everyone wants to take a look at. Now, I accepted it through my employer, so I was able to get the full amount of the grant, and all of which is needed. And you write that down in your budget. So any amount of money that's taken away really does impact your ability to perform your research to the best, to get the best data. So make sure you check on that. And then I just would say really briefly to bring to the table the IRB office, your grants office, and of course your manager. And I agree with Nina, it may even be worth it to speak with the person that your manager even reports to, just in brief. But just do your homework is my advice.
Yeah, and as I've mentioned, I had a job change in the middle of my grant. So my grant funds were dispersed, and I conducted the first half of my research at one institution, and then in October of this year moved to a different institution. And what that meant is I actually had to close out the grant with my previous institution from the IRB side. The funding side, we had to do a budget closeout, which for me meant meeting with both the budget office that administered my grant as well as our institutional research, so that sort of case was closed and that I was no longer an active researcher with the institution. The institution then had to return those funds to NACADA. I moved to my new institution, and I'm going through the IRB process there. 4 months so far. And I'll be returning then to NACADA when I'm approved with IRB, which should be thankfully this week. And then I'll need to go through that disbursement process once again. They'll need to distribute the funds over to my current institution, and then those funds will be reimbursable to me through my current institution. But that process in total will have been nearly 5 months with the institution change. So I had to hit the pause button. I was about 60% of the way through my research. And then as soon as the funds are redispersed, I can begin again. So I'm not affiliated. I have no sponsorship right now. I cannot conduct that research. So that whole project is on hold until I'm able to get new IRB approval, and then NACADA redistributes those funds and sponsors me once again. So it is a little bit of a challenge. I would not say that I would say, oh, well, you can't do it if you're anticipating any kind of a job change, but just know that and communicate really clearly with all of those parties about what you need to do. NACADA has been wonderful. They've been very, very supportive. They're sponsoring your research. They want you to get this done as long as you're doing what they've asked you to do and you're being ethical and responsible about everything. They've been super duper helpful. So wouldn't say, oh, if you're on the market right now, or if you're thinking about a career change or a geography change, and you're going to be moving soon, to wait, because it is only a year. If they make you an offer and you say, oh, I just got a new job, can I start this in September instead? I'm not saying that they're going to be like, of course you can. But I would say go ahead. If you're really interested in doing this and you're committed to it, go ahead and apply for it, and then work with NACADA as you need to, or your new institution. I was aware, obviously, of this issue when I started at a new position. So for me, this was part of not the negotiation process, but like, hey, I have this grant. I'm committed to finishing it. I'll need this sponsorship. I'll need your support for travel and things like that. So it's helpful to be very communicative through the process.
All right, so with that, I want to change gears just a little bit and talk to you about NACADA's publishing. And we have Academic Advising Today, and I have published in Academic Advising Today. And then we also have the NACADA Journal. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so I want to talk to you a little bit about Academic Advising Today. So once again, as Nina also mentioned, we want to conduct our research, and it's very important that we share this information. So we have 2 venues through NACADA. Of course, you can publish in all of the journals that are available to you. But especially if you get a NACADA grant, you want to make sure that you're sharing this information with the NACADA community as well. So Academic Advising Today is, as it was told to me, a good place to get your start if you really are looking to publish your data, or just publish some theory, or just publish on an area where you've worked on quite a bit and you have a nice bit of knowledge that you'd like to share. Academic advising today is not peer-reviewed publishing. So the bar for scientific research is not the same as the NACADA journal. So once again, it's a really good place to get your start. And you can see here the general information of what you need here and the different vantage points that you can take. It's all detailed here. And I must say, if you commit to publishing something in academic advising today and you submit it, the only reason why it would not get published, in all honesty, I'm willing to go out on a limb and say this, is because you weren't able to, or you didn't have the time to make the changes that were requested of you. So when it goes to the editor, you will receive some feedback about some of the things you need to strengthen, some things you need to change. And if you continue through that process, it is highly likely that you will be able to publish in academic advising today. The wonderful thing about NACADA, as many of you already know, they really want to support our work and want to get the information that we have out to the masses. So it also has great writing tips here on the website about what you need to do and how you should be writing, the formatting down to the font size, and how it should be formatted. Also goes through the submission process as well, and then the deadlines. A good point that I wanted to make known: if you have a particular topic that you've presented on a couple of times at either a region or annual meeting, and you really feel like you do a great job, why don't you turn that into an academic advising today publication? Because you're comfortable with it, you have the knowledge, and it's a really good way to transition to start to begin publishing. Very simple, and like I said, as long as you follow the recommendations put forth, you won't have any trouble with being published. So switching gears a little bit to the NACADA journal, once again, this is held to the scientific standard of research. So you do have to follow those 5 steps outlined, or even perhaps a little bit more, depending on your particular research or your theory. And for those of you that are members, we get copies of this as part of our membership, and it is a bit more difficult to be published in the NACADA journal. But here we have the information about the journal, how to publish, and then publication guidelines, which is really important as well. Hope this is working and everyone's seeing this okay. So for the publication guidelines, once again, the one thing NACADA does a really good job of, or one of the many things they do a really great job of, is they really provide us with the information that we need for submission. So quite detailed, what you need to do. All of this information is here, the timeline, and then once again, I have not published in the journal, but after I finish my research that is supported by NACADA, I will be submitting my research to the NACADA journal as well. And once again, like I was telling you, the acceptance rate is approximately 30%. So the threshold is quite high and is reserved for those who are conducting scientific research that will stand the test of validity when other people take a look at the work that's being done here. So just 2 areas within our own NACADA community where we are able to publish research. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Okay. And also for those of you that are interested and are able to attend the Region 2 NACADA conference coming up in March at the Omni William Penn Hotel, we do have a session that's just for those who are interested in research, so you can get some more information at the Region 2 conference as well. All right, so with that, I'll turn it over to Nina to close us out, and then we will open up for questions.
Yeah, so we want to talk with you a little bit about next steps. So, if you're a super beginner, you're a very beginner, you think you're interested in research, you don't even have a question yet, you just know, I want to do some research. Where do you start? What do you do? I think that you start by taking a look at conference sessions, even reading titles and abstracts, taking a look at academic advising today, taking a look at the NACADA journal. What are the questions that are being asked? What research has been done? Can you replicate that? That's research. So please don't feel like You have to come up with a brand new idea, something that hasn't been done before. As Faye mentioned, we do want our research to be reliable and to be valid. And so if you see a study that was conducted at, you're a community college person and it was a community college, but it hasn't been, no one followed up on it. Do the same study. Get in touch with that researcher. Find out if that would be acceptable. I don't think you're going to find anybody in NACADA who says no to you. They would love for you to do that. Replicate that and see what the outcomes are. Have things changed over time? Is it a different population? So there's nothing wrong with that. Don't feel like you have to come up with a brand new idea or a brand new topic. Replicate that. As Faye mentioned, if you have a topic that you've presented on before, just start writing on it. Sometimes when you write about something, an idea will come to you. So initially, if you're looking at academic advising today, especially, you don't have to have research. You might have an experience, an idea, something that happened at your institution, a successful program, recommendations. You can start there. And then you might find that that allows you to have some questions emerge that you'd like to follow up on. The other thing that you might do is take a look at those research sessions if you're able to go to the conference, or to try and find someone to collaborate with, whether that is to work together on a project, to expand upon something you did at your institution. And then we talk about that a little bit. So we did whatever assessment at our institution. Is that publishable research? Maybe. It might be more appropriate for academic advising today or for a presentation. But if you expand that, you collaborate with folks at another institution, or you take that somehow to a larger population, that could be something that you might apply for an NACADA research grant for, or sometimes you don't need a grant. If you have institutional support or your idea doesn't need any funding, then you can do this without financial support. So please don't feel like that's a barrier and the only way to get things done is maybe by getting a NACADA research grant or some other research grant. That's not necessarily true, and we certainly don't want you to feel like that is something that's an absolute necessity. Now, Faye and I both are traveling and we're interviewing folks face to face, which means we're recording things, we're transcribing things, and if you've never transcribed an hour and a half interview, you will not know how time consuming that can be. And so part of my grant funds transcription services, which is tremendously helpful and expedites my research process significantly. So my grant is actually fairly small. It funded just a little bit of travel and mostly transcription services. So, you don't have to have a big budget. You don't have to need a big budget. But so where do you start? Talk to someone at your institution, talk to a NACADA person, and talk to somebody that you don't necessarily think has something in common in terms of research interests or agendas, because you know what? They'll say, oh, I know someone who does. Let me link you up with them. I know someone else who is really interested in the same topic. And, my research now came out of my doctoral research. I made the recommendation in my doctoral research that we need to expand this. It needs to be a bigger pool. So that's what I'm doing. I'm using a bigger pool, and I'm interviewing folks all across the country who are advisors across the country. And I'm narrowing that down. I studied student affairs as a big net, and so now I'm gonna cast that net a little smaller and focus on a larger population of people who are just advisors, so I can talk about that particular subset. But talk with people. If you have a small idea, flesh it out. What are the challenges? How can you do this? Is it too big? Is it too small? How fast do you want to finish this? Longitudinal studies, wouldn't that be fabulous, right? We can take our students from freshmen and we can see them all the way through to graduate school. Oh, that sounds nice, doesn't it? No. It's a long, long process, even when you just study something for 6 weeks. So you do want to share ideas with people and you do want feedback. So if your next step is just chatting with someone, do that. Take that next step. And don't feel like you're down here and research is way up here. We can help you get there. And actually, the research is probably down here. It's not quite as scary and big as you might think. So we'll help you get there. So the next step really is just talking about it with someone else. Share your ideas with someone. Let them know what you want to do. It can be intimidated. What research methodology do I use? What's my theoretical framework? We can help you. It's okay. we'll get you there. And Faye and I both do qualitative research, but your research doesn't have to be qualitative. There's certainly a lot of data out there about our students, and we can look at things like retention rates and graduation rates and persistence rates and outcomes from first year seminars and all kinds of things like that. So don't feel like, because we're talking about qualitative research, that's necessarily what you need to do. But start small, start talking with someone about your ideas, and we'll get you there. I think I went 7 years ago to my first research session at a conference. I thought, yeah, someday. And this is someday. So it takes a while. So don't be intimidated by it. But if you're really excited about it, let's help you get there.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much, Nina. And with that, we'll open it up for questions if anybody has any questions for us.
Yeah, and I'm just so everyone knows, I'm gonna turn the recording off now, just so the Q&A isn't recorded. But